on at 3, so.
Yeah, but he's a West Coast guy. That might mean a little there.
I mean, we can start if we have to. And bring him in.
And welcome everybody to the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly sports talk show, streaming on all your favorite platforms. Pat, Parris, and I join you every Tuesday at this time. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Doing pretty well, Jason. Excited about the show. This is a great time of the year. A lot of sports overlapping, a lot to talk about.
We'll have Yogi Roth on in a little bit. Yogi Roth, a Pac-12 football analyst. He'll be calling the Arizona football against USC game, a homecoming this Saturday. We'll get him on in just a little bit. Pat, it's kind of like a slang phrase, right? Who's your daddy? I kind of forget about that. I kind of forgot about that phrase, right? Until this past weekend when the Yankees were playing the Astros and it came up again. And then Bob Costas said, well, to be honest, the Astros are the Yankees' daddy. And then it got me thinking to today and this week, and Arizona football playing USC. And you know what, Pat? USC's been Arizona's daddy. I think the Wildcats are 8-37 lifetime against the Trojans.
That speaks a lot of volumes to what USC's been over the last, 50 years. And certainly since Arizona joined the Pac-12 to make it the Pac-10 at the time, then the Pac-12, USC's been kind of the cream of the crop, right? With the exception of Oregon jumping up in the last decade or so. There's Yogi.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hi, Yogi. Thanks for joining us. Yogi Roth, of course, from Pac-12 Network with Jason Barr and Pat Parris. Yogi and I go way back. I mean, way back to the Pittsburgh days. You were at Pitt. You were famously the somebody's roommate, right? Somebody at Pitt that was pretty good.
Yeah, somebody that people in Arizona know pretty well, Larry Fitz.
Yeah, Larry Fitzgerald roommate, and got to know Yogi a little bit as a football player, and then. You were always kind of wanting to know what we were doing. You were kind of eyeballing the TV side of things, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and you were amazing. Like, I still think about moments with you and other people back in that era for us that were always so gracious with me. And I try to be that now that, I'm, the older one when I'm talking to college students every week. I go to a campus and try to connect with a communication school or meet players that want to do what you've done for so long or what I get to do now for a living. And it's awesome. So you easily could have just kind of pushed me to the side and said, I got the Steelers, I got the Penguins, I got, Larry Fitzgerald to cover. You're like, no, let me show you how a camera works. Hey, come on in, check out the newsroom. And Pat, I've always remembered that and loved when we reconnected out here on the West Coast.
Yeah, I appreciate those words. But Yogi, people who see you on TV have to understand that Yogi is exactly who Yogi is, and really down to earth. And it was a pleasure to know you then. We also kind of connected with Walt Harris a little bit too, and I know that he was one of your early guys, and then it became Pete Carroll as well.
Yeah, I got really lucky, I think, in my football life to have so many powerful people in my life now. And then, of course, to create the foundation. I remember Walt Harris, and he gave me the opportunity to walk on, and then had the courage to play me, and then give me a scholarship. Those are all things where I think as a head coach, like, you want to play the best guys, but you don't necessarily want to miss in recruiting, because they had to have missed on guys for somebody like me to play. And I think the humility that Walt showed, I clearly appreciated. And then to be that young at 22 and be asked to join Pete Carroll's staff was mind blowing to me. I used to visit Pete in the summers because his son Brennan, who's now the OC, as you know, for Arizona, he's one of my closest friends. And I'd go out to SC out here in LA on spring break, and I'd train with the staff. I'd work out at the facility. And then when I turned 22, I was doing sideline for Pitt Radio, and Pete called me one night in the middle of the night and said, "Hey, what do you think? Want to come on out?" And I said, "Sure. Can I go to grad school?" So I knew what SC and Annenberg was all about. And they said yes. And I stuck for 4 years. I had a chance every year to leave, but I just felt, you got to trust your gut sometimes. I just felt like something special was going on at SC and with Coach Carroll specifically. And I understand what a gift that was to be in my, early to mid 20s, to have somebody like that really shape the clay that my parents had created and give me direction and real concrete principles that I still lean on now in life.
We're talking to Yogi Roth. I'm Jason Barr. Yogi, good afternoon. Along with Pat Parris here on the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. We'll get to your book, Five-Star QB, in a little bit as well. Want to also talk about the game here. You're going to be the analyst for the Pac-12 Network this coming Saturday, homecoming for Arizona against USC. We were just kind of joking here that USC has been Arizona's daddy, if you will. 8-37, I think, are the Wildcats against the Trojans. What do you think of the significance of USC coming here for the final time?
Well, it's huge. I mean, I had a chance to call a couple SC games this year, been around the guy you see on the screen, Lincoln Riley, for a while. He's really impressive. Everything about SC and their program, like, I know it's probably easy to dislike them because they're leaving the league, but you get around them and you sense the humility, the talent, the work ethic, the structure, the organization, and then the process that they've really created since they got there, really in full force last December, January, got an off-season program. And you're watching this team, I think, grow before our eyes. And I think all of us that watched the Utah game back a week ago said, oh, wow, like, just look out, because when they get back on the field, this is going to be different. And after talking to people there earlier this morning in advance of the game, they said, look, the bye week wasn't what bye weeks are. It wasn't let's rest the veterans. It wasn't let's take it easy. It wasn't let's get our bodies right. It was let's get back to real practice, because this team thinks they could take a real run at a Pac-12 title and a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, USC has been impressive, Yogi. You've also been able to call an Arizona game, I believe, if not two Arizona games. You have to have been impressed with what Jedd Fisch has been able to do leading up to this USC game on the offensive side of the football, for sure.
Yeah, this is my third straight game for Arizona, right? We had the Oregon one, sellout at home, had the last one at Washington, and now here we go again for homecoming. And, I got to know Jed back with the Seahawks. We both interviewed the same day for the Seahawks back in 2009. I ended up leaving coaching and getting into the media. He stuck in coaching, and now here he is as a head coach in the Pac. And I've always enjoyed what he does offensively. I think what I really appreciate the most was his plan. I talked to him about 5 years ago. He came on my podcast, and he laid out his vision as a head coach. He wasn't a head coach then. He was working for the LA Rams and Sean McVay, but he had it so detailed. And then he took a year to go to the Patriots, and it really crystallized how he wanted to operate as a head coach. And I say all that because when he showed up in Tucson, I think there's some early skepticism. And then now what we've seen is somebody who has a real plan. We're not watching a first-time head coach learn on the job. We've all seen that before. That is not the case with Jedd Fisch. They need to add, of course, talent. They need to find ways to get better defensively. But to your point on offense, receiving corps is as talented as the top three in the league, which I think are Washington and USC and Arizona. The offensive line has improved all year, starting a true freshman, one of the better true freshmen in America, and a guy I think will be an All-American in Jonah Savaiinaea. And then the quarterback is playing at an all-conference level, right? We knew he could do that. So they'll have the ability to move the ball, and SC is going to have to come in really focused, or they'll find themselves in a dogfight. And I do think Arizona has a chance to go win this ball game, because this is college football still 18 to 22-year-olds, man. Like, as you know, anything could shake out come Saturday night.
Well, Yogi, a chance to win the game, but they're going to have to play a lot better defensively. And yes,
Yeah.
Jedd Fisch has invigorated the program. Yes, he's brought life into the program. There's a buzz. The recruiting, Tedero and McMillan, there's so many good things. But Yogi, you've got to admit here, they clearly have taken a step backward defensively this year. They can't stop anybody the last couple of weeks. You've got teams setting records against them. Is there any way for them to improve or do anything better defensively? Or do they just have got what they've got the rest of the year and they've got to tackle in the offseason?
Well, I think it's probably a combination. I mean, they've got what they've got from a personnel standpoint. You can't trade for Christian McCaffrey, for instance. Like, there's no trades that are going to happen here in college football, thank God, as of now. But with that said, I really believe a head coach's job, and especially on defense, and I learned this, Pat, back in the day from Paul Rhodes, was you got to have hope. And I think that comes from the head coach. So I'd imagine, and I'll meet with Jed later this week in advance of our game, and Johnny Nansen and their staff. I'd imagine they went back and said, okay, these are the things we've done well. Here's the things where we've struggled. But we're going to double down on a couple things that we've done well. Like, at times we've gotten to the quarterback. At times we made plays on the ball downfield. At times we've tackled in space, and at times we haven't. And I say that because I think defensively it's easy to say we don't have the players. It's easy to say we're going to go get them in recruiting. Like, we know players are going to come to Tucson. We know the personnel will get better, but it won't get better by Saturday. It is what it is. So what can you do? You're going to have incredible hope and belief, and then most importantly, you got to play fast. And I think defensively, we used to call it a pit the mad dog way, if you remember that with Paul Rhodes, where We didn't have a bunch of first round picks. We just got guys play really hard, fly to football, and fit their gap. And that's what I want to see from Arizona come Saturday night. Do they simplify so they could play as fast as possible? Do they cut a few things out of the defense so they play as fast as possible? They're going to have to take chances, mix up man and zone, and they might get burned. And that's what happened in the Oregon and Washington game, to be quite honest. When they did take chances, the other side just made them pay for it, and that'll be the dance against USC and Lincoln Riley.
Yogi, I want to go back to USC and what your initial thoughts were as a USC guy in your second life when you heard that they and UCLA were going to leave the Pac-12. What was your initial reaction to that?
It's one of those moments I'll remember the rest of my life. I was interviewing the parents, the father of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud's mother in front of the top high school quarterbacks in America, doing like a parent seminar. And my phone kept blowing up. And I'm looking down at it like, is my wife okay? Are my kids okay? And then I looked at the alerts and I was like, is our conference okay? And I did what probably everybody did who's been around the Pac forever. I mean, I've been here over almost 20 years now. You're heartbroken, you're angry, you're frustrated. You go through all those stages of grief, and then you accept it and you try to find meaning in it, and then you move on. And once I got through like the middle part of that first week of July, I said, okay, cool. Like I've talked to enough ADs and coaches and people in powerful positions in the league to feel as though the league is going to emerge. And now here we are in late October. I still feel the same thing. I feel like the 10 are going to emerge. I feel as though the expansion of the playoff really gives, let's just talk about the brands in this school, Oregon or in this league, Oregon and Washington, a clear path to the playoff. Like you're going to get an AQ if you just do what you should do every year. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I was heartbroken, disappointed, frustrated, angry. Like, of course, felt all those things. And I feel for those teams. I mean, look, college football isn't easy going to Pullman. It's not easy going to Berkeley. It's not easy going to Corvallis. And USC and UCLA at their prime have lost some of those games. I called SC in Corvallis this year. Well, now they're going to go to Iowa, and they're going to go to Indiana, and they're going to go to Maryland. They're going to go to some places where, like Purdue, you're going to have to be on it every week. And I wonder, when we look back at this in 10 years, would either one of those teams made the playoff more times if they remained in the Pac, or will they be making appearances year after year in the Big Ten? I don't know. But, man, it's a bummer to see them go. But I wish them well. I've loved calling their games this year and next year, and we'll continue to celebrate the daylights out of the players and staffs.
Well, Yogi, you just hinted on it right there. Is this really going to be what's best for USC and UCLA? I think about a UCLA student athlete who now has to fly all over the country to go and play somewhere. I think about a basketball team that's going to have really tough weekends, almost like an NBA type of travel schedule. And I think you alluded to it with that point there. Hey, it might be, tougher to get in the playoffs now with the Big Ten. I know it's a lot of money right away, and I know it's not an answer that we can have, for a few years down the road. But in your heart of hearts, your gut feeling, is this really going to be a good thing for UCLA? Pat's even made the analogy of when Nebraska switched conferences. What's your gut feeling here, Yogi, on whether this is really going to be good for UCLA and USC down the road?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look at A&M, right? I wonder if they'd rather be in the Big 12 right now. Like they haven't done obviously anything in terms of the standard that we thought they would be coming into the year. I believe in Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly. I think their teams will always be prepared, will put themselves in position for championships. I don't think it's the best thing for student athletes, their families, let alone like sports outside of football. I think we all understand why when you look at the travel that you just referenced. I look at like parents going to games. Right? I remember when my folks went to games and they could drive to West Virginia, right? Like you'd fly to Miami. That'd be the one game in the Big East, for instance. You're going to have to do that a lot. Now, I know it's not you don't have 15 trips in a college football season. You have 5, 6, maybe 7 in a given year. But no, man, I don't think it's great. And I don't think it's great for the sport because at least as of today, we don't just have an NFC and an AFC. Like we still have these other parts. And I get worried. And I'm not a big fan of these super conferences because everybody doesn't play each other. Like if you look at the SEC now, Bama's played Georgia once in the last decade as a crossover when you exclude 2020 and the pandemic season where there are only conference games. I don't think that's great for the sport. It might be great for their league in terms of positioning them for the playoff. I don't think it's great for the sport when you got all these teams in your league and everybody doesn't see each other. So we'll see. But no, like overall, I'm definitely not a huge fan of that idea or the idea of massive super conferences, especially when like money's the driver, and I think this whole thing has unearthed a truth in college football, which is, money and TV rights and media rights are a massive driver in this thing. And it bums me out because the one thing that won't change is the NFL is not expanding as we know it. Less than 3% of college athletes get drafted, right? You still have to go to college. And I wonder in this model, how many classes are athletes going to go to? Do we, in 5 years, my partner Ted Robinson brings this up every once in a while, do you have a world where you just sign to play your sport at a school and you can opt into classes? I still believe in student athletes and that experience because I've seen it too often. And I know when careers end, you got to go somewhere else and figure something else out. And everybody isn't making, millions and millions of dollars. So we'll see. I'm definitely not going to be the get off my lawn guy though on it. I want to stay positive. I want to celebrate the opportunity for those schools. And then I think we'll have the conversation again in 5-10 years and see where we net out.
Yogi Roth is our guest here on the Huddle. You brought up student athletes, and you do a great job of telling the story of the student athletes, of really helping us understand that player individually, not just a name or a number. And part of that is your new book, 5-Star QB. Yeah, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be, putting your book up here and making sure everybody picks up a copy of this. It's really, really well done. Joey Roberts, your co-author here. Forward by Pete Carroll. You got to read that as well. Tell me what the impetus of this book is, and explain what you talked about. Maybe 50 quarterbacks, somewhere around there.
Yeah, well, your right thumb there was right next to Tyler Palco's face. If you remember him from back in the day.
Oh, I do remember Tyler Palco. Yeah,
yeah, he's one of the very few lefties on that in that book. But basically, 3 years ago, Joey and myself, we both were parts of a quarterback camp called the Elite 11, which think American Idol for high school quarterbacks. We've seen the best in the country for basically the last 20 years. And 3 years ago, we sat down in a coffee shop after the final camp and we said, man, players and their parents keep asking the same questions. There's no guidebook on how to be an elite recruit or how to be a walk-on or how to be the parents of a walk-on or how to be the parents of a 5-star quarterback. So we said, what if we created something like a guidebook? So we said, all right, we started writing down our answers and our chapters. And we said, well, our voices are cool. Like I'll give my advice. You feel that in every chapter of the book, but we need other voices. So we went through the list of the 132 quarterbacks that have been part of the elite 5-star ranking, that have been named 5-star quarterback at some point over the last 22 years. And we said, hey, do you want to give some advice? And 54 of them said, yes, let's go do this. The other 50 plus we couldn't get a hold of, or they just didn't want to really unearth some of those scars. But the 54 we got to talk to us just shared their path from recruiting, a visit, how to manage parents, how to manage the opposite sex on college campus, how to manage transferring, NIL, mental health, you name it. And then we got to that point, we said, well, let's add more voices. Let's add ambassadors of the game. So I called Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Lincoln Riley, David Shaw, Ryan Day, Jed Fish, Herm Edwards, anybody I really respected in the game, the Holinsky family, Brenda Tracy, Dr. Michael Gervais in high performance psychology, John Schneider, the GM of the Seahawks, and said, can you give advice and pour in to these families? And as you would imagine, everybody said yes. And that's why we got to the book you're holding, about 600 pages of advice and stories that I believe has already done. It's been out for a couple months, but continues to impact people on their path.
Yeah, and it really, you mentioned it as a guide for parents and for athletes, but I think it gives an insight to those of us who really care about college football, high school recruiting, who Jason and I on a daily basis are talking about, the recruits around the state of Arizona. It's a great guide for that as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's the third part that we probably didn't anticipate having such a big impact. It was people that are in recruiting and the fans of the school, right? Bo Nix is in the book, and he talks about on his visit, the student section was chanting his name to come. Years later, they're chanting his name to get him off the field, right? Like I think oftentimes, and it'll happen every weekend in college football, your team loses a heartbreaker and somebody's going to hit send, and it's going to be a message to a young 18 to 22-year-old male and say, I'm going to be blunt here, it's going to say, you should kill yourself. That's the truth, whether it's the kicker who misses the field goal, whether it's a quarterback or receiver who drops a pass. And I didn't have to live through that. Right? I remember the Miami game where the ball 6 inches past my fingers. What would my DMs have been that night? And I talked to a lot of those players and families that go through that, and it's soul crushing. So I think fans that read it, they get an insight into what it's like to be an elite player. They have a little empathy. Maybe they hit pause before they attack a player or attack a program or make it, visceral. And there's so much access to players now because of social media and NIL. Maybe they just pause for a second. And I think it's important because what happened with all these players, they all got defined as the top player in the world, but not one of them asked for it. I interviewed all those guys, every interview. Not one said I was begging for someone to name me a 5-star player. It happened, and all of a sudden I was in a spotlight and there was an expectation for my performance that's pretty impossible to meet. When you look at out of all those 134 quarterbacks, one ever won a Super Bowl as a starter. And it was Matthew Stafford, year 13, team 2. So you're probably not going to live up to the expectations.
That's amazing, right?
Interesting. That's a great stat. I wouldn't have guessed that at all. You mentioned Bo Nix. Boy, Yogi, he's going to be a heck of an NFL player. No, what are your thoughts on him?
I think so. I think he's playing his best football. Dan Lanning and Jed Fish remind me of one another on different sides of the ball, respectively. But man, he just has breathed life into Bo's career. Bo went to Oregon sight unseen. He showed up on campus because he wanted a fresh start with a program that had a chance to go to a championship. And look at him now. After that first game, 49-3, everybody put the blame on him to bounce back in the style in which he has. To me, Oregon's playing the best football in the league. They got the hardest path to Vegas, but we'll see. And I think Bo will have a path now to the NFL that he probably didn't have a year ago.
Hey, I want to ask you about George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner. He seems to really speak his mind, and he's been outspoken about the whole realignment and everything. What are your thoughts on what he's going to bring to the Pac-12? Maybe already is with some of the digital media rights and things like that.
Yeah, Commissioner Kliavkoff is one of the more illustrious leaders I've ever been around, right? You referenced Pete Carroll. I've been around a lot of top coaches in my career. He's got that factor to him that you want to follow his lead. I'm so excited to see where our league goes next with our media rights. Like, I know all the rumors and read the articles like everybody else, but the thing that I like most about our commissioner is that he's a visionary. He's not afraid to take chances, and he got into the business because of the idea and concept around being a student athlete. Right? He understands the balance that you have to compete to create around academics, around performance, around your mental health. I think he's really connected and savvy in that regard. And you look at his resume and what he's done with high performers, high achievers, big media companies, media rights. It's a really fun time to be an employee in a league that, only months ago, it was reported like it was going to vanish. Yeah. And I think he's done a nice job of stabilizing it. And I think he's going to, lead us into the future. And I don't know what the future will hold, but I'm really proud to still be a part of this league, and I hope to be a part of it for another 20 years.
Yogi, I think I know you well enough to ask you this, because Jason and I were talking about this before we went on the air. You're such a Pac-12 guy now. Any thoughts of ever going, and working nationally at ESPN, or any opportunities? Or are you so entrenched on the West Coast now in the Pac-12 that you haven't even given a thought to leaving this area?
Yeah, I mean, we both know how the business goes. Like, you listen as calls come in, or you intrigued by jobs that become open. I'll say this: like, my career goal has been, since I first visited the Rose Bowl in 2003, when SC played Michigan, is to call the Rose Bowl. So wherever that is, on whatever platform that is, I could be on one that isn't even created yet. That's always going to be a goal. I think that's just the most majestic experience in sport. I've been at, I think, 17 straight Rose Bowls now in my career. It's one of my favorite days of the year, and I've always felt this. It is a true honor to have a microphone and an opportunity to celebrate the game and coach the viewer. I love doing it at the Pac-12 because I got to go there day one. And what I think was so meaningful for that is that very rarely in our profession, or any profession, you can start somewhere day one, and you feel the small wins, the big wins, the small losses, the disheartening losses. I like that, being a team guy. At the Pac-12 now, I have a direct line where I could talk to the president of our network or George Kliavkoff. I don't know where else you may get that. I love the essence of my job. I get to tell stories, get to call games. But yeah, man, I'd love to call the biggest games in the country, and that opportunity presents itself. Hopefully it's Pac-12 games, when we do our next media rights deal. And I hope that I am calling the number one game on the West Coast on whatever platform we end up becoming, and kind of go from there. I always have to remind myself, my wife's great at this, of like, hey, you're still young in it. Like, your career's not going to be over tomorrow. So just slow down and enjoy it. And this year's probably been, honestly, Pat, the most enjoyable one of my career, because on every campus, with every team, with every stop, I've really tried to be connected to it, because we don't know how long it's going to go. And it's been really a beautiful 8-9 weeks now. And that's why I can't wait to get there for homecoming with Gronk and Jed, and see all the lights and the fans, and almost soak it up as much as, an alumni is coming back on their homecoming in Arizona.
Fantastic. Yogi Roth, thank you so much for joining us here on the Huddle. I didn't want to have you on, to be honest. You're too handsome, you know. I just like Pat. I don't want him on.
I had to twist his arm to
he's
get
way
you
too good
let him
looking.
on.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, he makes us all look ugly. But Pat's like, no, we're gonna have Yogi Roth on. We got to talk to him. So you've been a fantastic guest. Really appreciate it. The book is 5-Star QB. Yogi Roth. He's going to do the Pac-12 network game, Arizona homecoming against USC this Saturday. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, well, let's hang out on Saturday, Pat. If
Yep.
I don't see you Saturday, I'm gonna be frustrated, man.
I have season tickets, but I'm going to yell down at you, and you're going to come over from when you're down on the field before the game.
Yeah, just meet me in the DJ booth, DJ Scooter. We'll get it rolling.
All right, we'll do that. All right.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Yogi.
Thanks for
Do
having me.
appreciate it. We'll see ya.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, he's too handsome.
He didn't want to talk to me. He only wanted to talk to you.
Well, we haven't, we've texted and
mentioning
things.
Pat.
We've texted and stuff, but we haven't. That's the first time I've actually chatted with him probably in 15 years, which is odd because we both, I've been back here for almost 7 years, and he's been out here the whole time, but we just haven't run into each other. We just text. So it was good to see him.
All right.
We'll get on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, he gave some hope for Arizona's defense on Saturday. That's what you got to have, hope.
Well, let's be honest. You have to outscore USC somehow.
You know what? That's how they won the game 10 years ago. I'm actually going to show that video tomorrow.
Okay.
Today we're doing something on Hunter Echols on the news, but tomorrow we're going to show the game from 2012. I'll never forget in the post-game news conference. They won, by the way, I think it was 39-36. Marquise Lee set the Pac-12 record for 345 receiving yards.
Yeah.
And somebody asked Rich Rod what their plan was to stop Marquise Lee in the post-game news conference. And because the Arizona won and Rich Rodriguez was in such a good mood, I'll never forget this. He said, well, our goal was to just let him run his round as much as possible and maybe at the end of the game and tire himself out. That's what happened.
That's a good one from Rich Rod.
And they won 39-30. Yeah, he was in a great mood.
Yeah.
And they won 39-36. So we're going to show that video tomorrow. Today we'll do something on Hunter Echols just because he spoke today. But I thought that's historical. And hold on, I got the stats here. Arizona is 8-37 against USC, 4-15 in Tucson. That's not good, Pat.
That's not good. Could they be 5-15 though after this one? The last time they're going to be in Tucson, unless somehow miraculously they schedule them in a non-conference game, which I don't think would ever.
Don't look for it.
No, that'll
Don't
never
look for it.
yeah. No, you were the first one to bring this up to me yesterday, and I hadn't really thought about the historical nature of it until you mentioned. Yeah, this is likely the last time we're ever going to see USC in Tucson.
Well, and Arizona Athletics doesn't want to admit it, but a lot of fans do come for the opposing team. And this is going to hurt them in gate attendance. If you've got San Diego State, nice program, but if you've got UNLV or somebody else coming here, fans aren't coming to see a Mountain West team or anybody. You need to reschedule that with some type of brand team or a big time team or a team like North Dakota State that brought half its town here. Because you're going to lose. You're going to lose gate. They've got to strategically replace that game.
Yeah, you're right, because in a lot of seasons we see the same thing with UCLA. UCLA will bring crowds. Oregon brought some people. There's a reason why that game was sold out. Now Arizona fans turned out for that Oregon game a few weeks ago, but Oregon certainly did as well. There are some teams that just have regional, if not nationwide, appeal. USC has fans all over the country. And they certainly do travel pretty well. You think of a team like
it's the Arizona fans coming to see them, though.
Yes, yeah.
I mean.
Some will come to see them, but you think a team like an Iowa Hawkeye, that Iowa Hawkeyes team that travels well. But again, that's a Big Ten team. They're not coming here to play in the non-conference. That makes no sense for a team like that.
No, but that's the type of example we saw with North Dakota State.
Yeah,
you've got to find something like that.
Right.
A BYU, something or. Somebody like that, we'll see. All right, we're up against the bottom of the hour, so I hope everybody enjoyed that with Yogi Roth. He said some interesting things for sure. Kind of also, I got the feeling he didn't want to come out and say it directly. He's not so sure how well this is going to work out for UCLA and maybe USC. If you're reading between the lines, I got that impression. But anyway, All right, for Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. This has been The Huddle. We'll see you next Tuesday at the same time. Thanks, everybody.